What's up ladies and gents, Noli here and welcome back to another Payday 2 video. Today's video is a bit of an offshoot of the Things You Didn't Know series, but here I'm focusing specifically on all of Payday 2's masks, which allude to something outside of the game itself. As many of you will know, Payday 2 has hundreds of masks for you to choose from, so unsurprisingly Overkill decided to draw from other popular media to inspire their designs and descriptions. These sources range from other video games and films to the historical and mythological. This video is going to go through every reference I could find, showcasing the masks and their inspirations, listing over 90 masks in total. For the most part, any mask that is obviously just a cross-promotion, such as those from speedrunners or Antisphere, will not be covered as they're not intended to be subtly referential. For those of you that don't know, the mask design system is actually what my channel was founded on and where I got my start on YouTube. As ever, covering masks is a nostalgic and fun experience, so I really hope you enjoy. If you do, let me know by giving the video a like and subscribing to the channel, as the goal is to hit 50,000 subscribers before the new year. Oh, and also, if you enjoy, I'll follow it up with an episode covering all referential design cosmetics in the game, including patterns. Let's get started by taking a look at all the video game references. So obviously there are lots of Hotline Miami inspired masks, most of which were added in the crossover DLCs, so I'm not going to cover them individually as there's nothing subtle to them. But before the official crossovers took place, Overkill was already throwing in references to one of their favourite series. Added early on in the game's life cycle, we have Mark, taken directly from the design of the mask worn by one of the fans from Hotline Miami 2, here with a tiny Overkill bomb in its eye. Peter was another community mask added with its name and likeness coming from one of the later unlockable masks from Hotline 1. And we also have a launch mask, the Hog, which is an original design but possibly inspired by the Aubrey mask worn by Martin Brown in Hotline 2 before Overkill had permission from the guys at Denison Games to use their designs in full. Next up, for the most part, the Dead by Daylight crossover promotional masks are basic monster designs, but two of them are actually based on killers in the game and worthy of mention. The aptly named Killer is based on the Trapper, the first killer back in the beta, and the Dendron is based on the Wraith, another killer from the once Starbreeze published asymmetric horror game. The Cursed one references one of my favourite games ever, Dark Souls 2, with its name, design and description. Our character gets called Cursed One many times throughout the game, and the mask itself resembles Vendrick, the equally cursed King of Drangleic. Next up, we've got a slightly more obscure one, the Grin, one of my favourite classic masks which alludes to Ulf and Bo Anderson's original company that preceded Overkill Software. The iconic smile is based on the company's old logo, but it's slightly sad to think that neither brother is involved with Payday all these years later. Back onto the more direct references, we have the Shirai, a nod towards Mortal Kombat and the Shiryu clan, a group to whom the fighter Scorpion belongs, wearing a not too dissimilar mouth covering. All the Payday E3 Humble Bundle mask packs tuck to the spirit of the event to reference some of the most popular franchises in gaming history. The Crossbreed takes on the likeness of the Protoss Zerg hybrid from the Starcraft series. Electra Rodent is an impressively bootleg Pikachu. The Titan is based on a combination of Colossi from Shadow of the Colossus, Quadratus and Malus. Borsuk takes its appearance from the Witcher series, resembling the medallion witches wear around their necks. The Mask of the Moon is a legendary Majora's Mask from the Legend of Zelda title of the same name. Floating Guy is of course the Kako Demon from Doom. Gareth is modelled on Garrus Vakarian from the Mass Effect series, and the Judge is a Final Fantasy XII reference based on the character Judge Bergen. These next references should be fairly obvious when you see them, but PC players may not even be aware that these masks exist. Every time Payday was released on a new console, they received a new exclusive mask from a first-party title on the system. Back for the 360 release, it was the mask Thespian, Master Chief's helmet from the Halo franchise, while PS3 users had access to Sweet Tooth, the car and nickname of the Twisted Metal character Needless Kane. The Xbox One version of Payday 2 features the Intuition, a mask seemingly based on a combination of Fulgore and Glacius from Killer Instinct. For PS4 players, fans of The Last of Us get to use the Griefer, a mask based loosely on the appearance of the infected clickers. The mask 068 seems to be a double reference to both Zero, a playable character in Borderlands 2, and Grey Fox from Metal Gear Solid. The General Overkill cap has absolutely got shades of M. Bison from Street Fighter, although the flight cap is somewhat of a standard design at this point. The Night Viz goggles Cloaker-san and Cloakers in general are a nudge and a wink towards Sam Fisher and the Splinter Cell series, but this mask also seems to reference the anime Naruto, mentioning the Anbu, a special forces group prominent in the series. Finally, it's tough to say if this is exactly what Overkill were going for, but the April Fool's mask seemed to be heavily inspired by the cel-shaded designs and character specializations of the characters in the Borderlands series. Next up, it's time for the film category. Let's start things off with some iconic film shades. First up, it's John Wick's glasses, a pair named Colleteral, which are somewhat based on the design of the glasses worn by Jamie Foxx's Max in the 2004 movie. We also have the Terminators. This one really is an easy reference to get, being modelled on the glasses worn by the Terminator throughout the franchise. Robo Arnold is another Schwarzenegger and Terminator reference, almost just as on the nose, so I doubt you missed it. The Reservoir Dogs are another pair of sunglasses coming straight out of a film from which they're named, and the Heat, much the same, closely resembling those worn by De Niro's character Macaulay in the 1995 heisting film. Also from Heat, we have the iconic hockey masks, the base game one which was designed after Waingro's mask, and the hockey Heat, as of course Armored Transport was itself inspired by the film. Staying with heisting films, an avenue which Overkill looked to inspire designs multiple times, we have the Nun, a mask worn as a disguise by the heisters in the film The Town. Moving on to the next franchise, the guys at Overkill are clearly big fans of the Alien films, the Eggian being based on the infamous chestburster from that dreaded scene, the Venomorph getting inspiration from the aliens themselves, the Xenomorphs, and seemingly the Lurker taking its design concept from the Xenomorph Queen. The franchise's not too distant cousin Predator has its own reference in game 2, with the Mega Kevin having shades of the Predator's appearance and seemingly deriving its name from Predator actor Kevin Peter Hall. The Troubled War veteran and Bloody Bandana are both fairly on the nose Rambo references that you don't have to look far to see. Friday the 13th is another franchise that devs clearly enjoy, with the base game mask Brainiac channeling Jason's appearance in Jason Goes to Hell The Final Friday, whilst the Mega Gauge Blade has more than a slight resemblance of his Jason X futuristic appearance. Sticking with the horror theme, the One Below mask is heavily inspired by the creature from the Black Lagoon. It could also be argued that H.P. Lovecraft's Shadow over Innsmouth cosmic fishmen were being channeled here too. The Invader mask has some classic horror vibes, seemingly taking inspiration from They Live, an extraterrestrial film from the late 80s. Baby Brazil is probably one of the most obscure references in the game, being designed from a mask worn by the Torturer in the 1980s film Brazil. A pretty horrifying look, to be honest. The mask Augmentation is another one which looks like it could come from a few sources, but given its link to Jimmy's voice actor Sharlto Copley, I'd guess it's actually referencing the film Elysium, one that has augmenting humans at its core. The Safety First mask added in the same update is probably the only movie reference that outright states where it comes from, inspired by the VR sex scene in the film Demolition Man, where of course it's a lot safer to do it that way than by fluid transfer, hence Safety First. Also unsurprisingly, seeing as the titular character is a heister in game and has his own DLC pack, the John Wick films have a couple of references hidden behind their masks, with Daisy being a masked version of Wick's pet Beagle, whose death in the first film set the events of the entire franchise into motion, and Mustang, a mask which references the car that was stolen from him that same night, a 1969 Ford Mustang Mach-1 coupe. Finally, from the film category, we have the early Gauge DLC pack masks, which, while not visually referential of anything, are all named after action film actors or their characters. From Weapon Pack 1, we have Arnold, of course Arnold Schwarzenegger, Dolph Lundgren, Jean-Claude Van Damme, and Chuck being Chuck Norris. From the Shotgun Pack, it's Clint Eastwood, Rutger Hauer, Steven Seagal, and the odd one out, John, which likely references Bruce Willis's character, John McClane, from the Die Hard series. Moving from film to TV shows, let's start off with a Futurama reference Overkill slipped in the form of the Mechanical Santa mask, based on the robot Santa in the episode Christmas Story. The racing helmet, the TIDS, is based on the bright white helmet of Top Gear's The Stig, the show's anonymous professional driver. The Optimist is a reference to the Transformers protagonist Optimus Prime in name and colour, but its appearance seems to also derive some inspiration from the Doctor Who Cybermen. Heister Sentry is another one that kids watching TV in the 90s should immediately recognise as obviously comparable to the Power Rangers helmet. Finally, Mega Kawaii goes beyond the general anime magical girl reference of the standard Kawaii mask, being a Sailor Moon reference specifically. Next up, let's dive into the mask with some sort of historical significance or inspiration, starting with a core heister mask. I'm sure most people will know this already, as Duke is a fan favourite, but his signature mask is heavily inspired by Michelangelo's statue of David, but with a marginally more aggressive expression. Of course, the Gauge Historical Pack had to make use of some real historical figures in its mask editions, so they're inspired by prominent figures within the Allied forces. The British Bulldog, of course, depicts Churchill, Old Blood and Guts bears the likeness of US Army General George S. Patton, and the Constable is Charles de Gaulle, the leader of the Free French Force during World War II. Another mask inspired by history is the Dillinger death mask, based on John Dillinger's actual death mask, moulded after the dramatic death of the Depression-era gangster. In more modern history, we have the Vlad mask, a replica of the Maskal 1, a real Spetsnaz combat helmet design, despite looking pretty unwieldy. I never thought I'd associate Payday with books and novels, but thanks to Overkill's wide-ranging referential material, here we're going to. Actually, one of my favourite darker references is seen in the Outlander mask, using a description from the book I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream, and the likeness of the final human in the post-apocalyptic setting to create a really chilling mask. Keeping up the darker tone, the Blackbird mask references Edgar Allan Poe's poem The Raven in its description, and the being appears to be remarkably similar in appearance to the description of the Dwergy creations of Dr. Frankenstein from Mary Shelley's 19th century novel. On the brighter side of things, the Christmas mask, the Strinch, is quite evidently linked to the Grinch, originally from Dr. Seuss's How the Grinch Stole Christmas. I wasn't sure whether I should put the next trio of masks in the film section or this one, as they all draw from the Lord of the Rings series, but either way, Graug appears to be based on the Balrog, Demon Shank is a clear reference to Sauron, and Khamul is one of the ring wraiths of the same name. Another category I wasn't necessarily expecting to cover is comic books, but someone at Overkill must be a big fan. First up, an obvious one, the Anonymous mask is based on the Guy Fawkes mask made iconic in the graphic novel V for Vendetta as the lead character V's disguise. It has since been popularised in the film and is particularly associated with the vigilante group Anonymous, hence the name. The mask Slicer is the spitting image of Shredders from the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle series, and funnily, most of the comic book masks are villain inspired. I guess that may come down to the gang's criminal inclinations. In any case, from Marvel, we have Dr. Crime, closely resembling Dr. Doom's faceplate, the Black Death, using the popular Thanos' likeness, Professor Wrath appearing to be Mr. Sinister, Volt is based on Apocalypse, and the Crow Goblin is of course Spider-Man's own Hobgoblin. From DC Comics, there's the much discussed Gauge Blade, which is strikingly similar to Deathstroke's face mask, although it's a bit less distinct than the others, so I can't say if this is certainly a reference without Overkill confirming it. Venger, on the other hand, is quite clearly a homage to Bane, particularly his appearance when played by Tom Hardy in the more recent Christopher Nolan film series. To round off the video, I have a few masks which make reference to things that I couldn't really define in any of the previous categories. First up, one of my favourite references by Overkill, given the tongue-in-cheek nature of it all, are the Paycheck Gang masks of Dallas in Chains, based on the image of some pretty shady unlicensed replicas being sold by the company Neon Nightlife. I guess this is one way to protect your IP. Fat Boy is based on the Big Boy Restaurant's mascot, the branding design of the diner chain found throughout the US and Japan. Oliver depicts the face of a famous awards ceremony trophy, an Oscar of course. Pickle face is certainly part of the Chains is in a Pickle running gag that's even seen an entire song created in its honour. Commander Crime is designed to invoke the image of the Cobra Commander from the G.I. Joe action figure series, and the Poetry Jam mask Warface carries another double reference, first to the Zergface meme, as well as dialogue in Full Metal Jacket clearly being the inspiration for its description. To end off, we have a couple of musically inspired references, with Mr. Smooth, another base game mask, being loosely based on and making reference to David Bowie's Ziggy Stardust persona, admittedly with a slightly uncanny look to it. And finally, the Road Rage mask is definitely designed with metal band Motörhead's logo as a reference point, with the tusks in particular being a dead giveaway. And that does it for all the mask references I could find and prove to some extent in Payday 2. If you guys like mask-based content, I have a massive almost 200 episode series showcasing some of my favourite designs in Mask of the Day. If that isn't enough, let me know, there's always a place for mask designs somewhere on this channel. These masks are all I have time for today, but Easter egg wise Payday 2 is absolutely laden. So if I missed any references that you have evidence for, do let me know in the comments or by following me on Twitter, and I'll follow up this video with a shorter part 2. This video was a blast to make. I feel I've learned a fair bit and broadened my pop culture knowledge in the process. Hopefully you have too. Either way, I hope to see you all in the next video very soon.